The sound of laughter echoed through Roosevelt High School's hallways, but it wasn't the kind that brings joy. It was cruel, mocking, and directed at the woman walking confidently toward classroom 204. Dr. Elena Kozlov adjusted her leather messenger bag and smoothed down her burgundy blazer. Her emerald eyes focused straight ahead despite the snickers following her thick Eastern European accent from her morning introduction at the faculty meeting. "Did you hear her try to say literature?" whispered one student to another as she passed. "Literature," another mimicked, rolling the R dramatically. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she kept walking. These teenagers had no idea what she was capable of. They saw a foreign woman with an accent trying to fit into their American high school. They didn't see the scars hidden beneath her long sleeves, the calluses on her knuckles from years of training, or the darkness she'd left behind in her homeland to start fresh in Denver, Colorado. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As she reached for the door handle of her new classroom, Elena whispered something under her breath in her native language, a phrase her old instructor used to say before every training session. Strength comes not from avoiding the storm, but from learning to dance in the rain. The door opened, and 28 pairs of teenage eyes turned toward her. Some curious, some indifferent, but a few, particularly those belonging to the group near the back, gleamed with the promise of trouble. Elena smiled and stepped inside, completely unaware that this moment would change everything. 3 months earlier, Dr. Elena Kozlov stood at the departure gate of Prague International Airport, clutching a one-way ticket to Denver. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her hands shook slightly as she reviewed the teaching contract from Roosevelt High School for the 100th time. The position was for an advanced literature and European history teacher, subject she was overqualified for, but it was her ticket to a new life. The past 2 years in Prague had been a nightmare she was desperate to escape. What started as her dream job at the International Security Institute had turned into something she never could have imagined. Dr. Elena Kozlov wasn't just any academic. She held a PhD in international relations from Charles University and had spent 5 years working as a cultural liaison for various European embassies. But her colleagues and students at the Institute knew her for something else entirely: her expertise in Krav Maga and tactical self-defense. It had started innocently enough. Elena grew up in a rough neighborhood in Bratislava, Slovakia, where her father, a former military officer, insisted she learn to protect herself. The world is not always kind to smart women, especially those who speak their minds, he would tell her while teaching her basic defensive moves in their small apartment. By age 16, Elena was training at a professional Krav Maga academy, and by 25, she was certified as an instructor. When she moved to Prague for her doctoral studies, Elena continued training to manage stress and stay physically fit. Her reputation grew within the martial arts community, and soon she was teaching evening classes at a local gym while completing her academic work. The combination of intellectual prowess and physical capability made her uniquely qualified for her position at the International Security Institute, where she trained diplomats and security personnel in both cultural awareness and personal protection. Everything changed when she met Viktor Petrov. Viktor was a charismatic Russian businessman who attended several of her cultural sensitivity seminars. He was handsome, well-educated, and seemed genuinely interested in her work. Their relationship developed slowly over months of professional interactions that gradually became personal. Elena, who had always been guarded about relationships, found herself opening up to Viktor in ways she never had before. She should have trusted her instincts. 6 months into their relationship, Elena discovered that Viktor wasn't just a businessman. He was connected to a network of individuals involved in human trafficking, using cultural exchange programs as cover for their operations. Worse, he had been using information from her seminars to identify vulnerable diplomatic personnel and their families. When Elena confronted Victor, threatening to expose him to authorities, he revealed a darker side she had never seen. The man who had once brought her flowers and discussed philosophy over dinner became cold and threatening. He made it clear that her expertise in self-defense wouldn't protect her from his connections, and that her academic reputation would be destroyed if she tried to expose him. "You think your little martial arts tricks scare me?" Victor had laughed during their final confrontation in her Prague apartment. "I have friends in places you cannot even imagine. One phone call, and your precious career disappears. Another phone call, and you disappear." But Victor had underestimated Elena. That night, she gathered every piece of evidence she had collected about his operations and delivered it to both Czech authorities and Interpol. Within 48 hours, Victor and 3 of his associates were arrested in a coordinated raid. The investigation revealed a trafficking network that had been operating across Eastern Europe for years. Elena should have felt victorious, but instead she felt hunted. Victor's organization was larger than anyone had realized, and several key players remained at large. Her testimony would be crucial for the prosecution, but it also made her a target. The authorities offered witness protection, but Elena had another idea. She had always dreamed of teaching in America, and now she needed a complete change of identity and location. Through a friend at the U.S. Embassy, she learned about emergency visa programs for individuals whose safety was compromised, while assisting international law enforcement. Within 6 weeks, Elena had a new identity, a work visa, and a teaching position at Roosevelt High School in Denver, Colorado. The irony wasn't lost on her. After years of training diplomats and security experts, she would now be teaching American teenagers about literature and history. But it felt like exactly the kind of normal, quiet life she needed to heal from the trauma of the past 2 years. Elena rented a small apartment in a modest neighborhood near the school and spent her first month in Denver trying to adapt to American culture. She practiced softening her accent, studied American teaching methods, and tried to suppress the hypervigilance that had kept her alive in Prague. She wanted to be just Dr. Kozlov, the literature teacher with an interesting European background, not Elena, the woman who had taken down an international criminal network. Roosevelt High School was a typical American public school with about 1,800 students. Located in a working-class area of Denver, it served a diverse population of students from various economic backgrounds. The building was older but well-maintained, with wide hallways lined with lockers and classrooms that still used traditional blackboards. Alongside newer smartboards. Principal Margaret Williams was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had been running Roosevelt for 8 years. During Elena's interview, she had been impressed by Elena's credentials, but concerned about her ability to connect with American teenagers. "Your academic background is impressive, Dr. Kozlov," Principal Williams had said, reviewing Elena's carefully edited resume. "But teaching high school is very different from university work. These kids can be challenging, especially for someone who might seem different to them." Elena had assured her that she was prepared for the adjustment, though privately she wondered if any amount of preparation could bridge the gap between her past life and this new role. The other faculty members were a mixed group. There was Robert Chun, the veteran history teacher who had been at Roosevelt for 15 years and served as unofficial mentor to new teachers. Sarah Martinez taught English and seemed genuinely excited to have another literature teacher to collaborate with. James Patterson, the athletic director and football coach, was friendly but clearly skeptical about whether Elena would be able to handle the more challenging students. "Kids these days don't respect authority like they used to," Coach Patterson had warned during Elena's first faculty meeting. "They'll test you, especially if they think you're an easy target. You've got to establish dominance early, or they'll walk all over you." Elena had simply nodded, not mentioning that she had once disarmed 3 men simultaneously during a training demonstration. The faculty also included Lisa Thompson, the school counselor who handled student behavioral issues. Lisa was passionate about helping troubled students, but often seemed overwhelmed by the magnitude of problems at Roosevelt. During their first conversation, she had painted a concerning picture of some of the challenges Elena might face. "We have some really good kids here," Lisa had explained, "but we also have some serious issues. There's a group of students who've been problematic for years. They're not technically gang members, but they operate like one. They intimidate other students, disrupt classes, and some of them have been involved in activities outside school. That worry me." She had specifically mentioned Tyler Morrison, a senior who had been held back twice and was now 19 years old in a school full of 14 to 18-year-olds. Tyler had a reputation for bullying both students and substitute teachers and had been suspended multiple times for aggressive behavior. "Tyler's got a following," Lisa continued. "Marcus Rodriguez, Ashley Burke, and Devin Walsh usually back him up. They're not necessarily bad kids individually, but together, they can be really destructive. They seem to target anyone they perceive as weak or different." Elena had listened to these warnings with growing concern, but also with a sense of familiarity. She had dealt with challenging personalities before, though admittedly not in a high school classroom setting. Her first week at Roosevelt had been relatively smooth. Elena taught 4 sections of advanced literature and 2 sections of European history, and most of her students seemed engaged and respectful. Her accent generated some curiosity and occasional giggles, but nothing malicious. The problem started during her second week, when Tyler Morrison was assigned to her 3rd period advanced literature class after being moved from another teacher's section due to a scheduling conflict. Tyler was immediately recognizable from Lisa's description: tall, broad-shouldered, with dirty blonde hair and the kind of smirk that suggested he was always looking for trouble. He was flanked by Marcus, a wiry Hispanic student with nervous energy, and Ashley, a girl whose expensive clothes and perfectly applied makeup seemed designed to intimidate rather than impress. From the moment Tyler entered Elena's classroom, the dynamic shifted. He made exaggerated faces when she pronounced certain words, whispered comments to his friends during her lessons, and generally created an atmosphere of disrespect that other students began to notice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena tried to address the behavior professionally. She spoke to Tyler privately after class, explaining her expectations and asking if there was anything about the material he was struggling with. Tyler's response was dismissive and barely contained his contempt. "Look, lady," he had said, deliberately emphasizing her accent as he spoke. "I don't know how things work in whatever country you're from, but here in America, teachers earn respect. They don't just expect it because they have some fancy degree." Elena had remained calm, but she recognized the challenge for what it was: a test to see if she would back down or escalate. In her previous life, she would have ended such a conversation quickly and definitively. As a high school teacher, her options were more limited. "I understand this is an adjustment for everyone," she replied carefully. "I'm here to help you succeed, Tyler, but I need you to show the same respect to me and your classmates that you would want for yourself." Tyler had laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Respect? You're going to have to do better than asking nicely if you want respect from me." The situation escalated over the following week. Tyler's disruptions became more frequent and more pointed. He would deliberately mispronounce her name, make comments about her clothes, and encourage other students to join in. Marcus and Ashley followed his lead, creating a toxic environment that was affecting the entire class. Other teachers began to notice. Robert Chun pulled Elena aside after a faculty meeting to offer support. "I've been dealing with Tyler for 3 years," he said. The kid's got problems at home. His dad's been in and out of jail. His mom works 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He's angry at the world, and he takes it out on anyone he thinks won't fight back. Elena appreciated the insight, but it didn't solve her immediate problem. Tyler's behavior was getting worse, and she could see it was affecting her other students. Some were starting to lose respect for her, while others seemed uncomfortable with the hostile atmosphere Tyler was creating. The breaking point came during her 3rd week at Roosevelt. Elena was conducting a discussion about symbolism in European literature when Tyler raised his hand with exaggerated politeness. "Yes, Tyler?" Elena said, hoping he was actually going to participate constructively. "I was just wondering, Dr. Kozlov," he said, deliberately mispronouncing her name. "Do they even have real books in your country? Or do you just make up stories about dragons and peasants?" The classroom erupted in nervous laughter. Elena felt her face flush, but she maintained her composure. "We have a rich literary tradition in Slovakia. Tyler, perhaps you'd be interested in reading some works by authors like Dominik Tatarka or Ludovic Stur." "Ludovic Stur?" Tyler repeated mockingly, rolling the pronunciation around his mouth like a foreign object. "Did you just sneeze, or was that actually supposed to be a name?" This time the laughter was louder, and Elena could see that even some of her better students were starting to smile. She was losing control of the classroom, and Tyler knew it. "That's enough," Elena said firmly. "Tyler, please see me after class." "Oh, I'll see you after class, all right," Tyler replied with a grin that made Elena's blood run cold. There was something in his tone that suggested this was about more than just classroom disruption. As Elena looked around the room, she realized that she was facing something far more serious than typical teenage rebellion. Tyler wasn't just being disrespectful. He was systematically undermining her authority in front of the entire class, and his confidence suggested he had no fear of consequences. That afternoon, as Elena sat alone in her classroom grading papers, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was somehow catching up with her. She had come to Denver to escape violence and intimidation, but it seemed like conflict had a way of finding her regardless of where she tried to hide. She touched the small scar on her left wrist, hidden beneath her long sleeves, a reminder of her final confrontation with Victor's associates before she fled Prague. Elena had promised herself she would never need those skills again. That Dr. Kozlov, the literature teacher, would be nothing like Elena, the woman who had taken down trained criminals. But as she watched Tyler and his friends gathering in the hallway outside her classroom, Elena began to wonder if she had been naive to think she could completely leave her past behind. The storm was coming, and Elena Kozlov was about to discover that sometimes the only way to find peace is to fight for it. The morning of Elena's 4th week at Roosevelt High School started like any other, but the tension in the air felt different. As she walked through the hallways toward her classroom, Elena noticed clusters of students whispering and pointing in her direction. Word had spread about Tyler's increasingly bold disruptions, and the student body was watching to see how the new foreign teacher would handle the situation. Elena had spent the weekend researching American classroom management techniques and consulting with other faculty members. Principal Williams had offered vague support, but made it clear that Elena was expected to handle the situation herself unless it escalated to violence. The message was unmistakable: prove you belong here, or find another job. Dr. Robert Chun had been more helpful, sharing strategies he'd developed over his 15 years at Roosevelt. The key with students like Tyler, he had explained, is to never show weakness, but also never escalate unnecessarily. These kids respect strength, but they'll use any overreaction against you. Elena appreciated the advice, but she knew something Robert didn't understand. In her previous life, showing strength meant something very different than giving detention or calling parents. The restraint required to be an effective teacher while suppressing her true capabilities was proving more challenging than she had anticipated. As Alina unlocked her classroom door, she found a surprise waiting for her. Someone had taped a crudely drawn picture to her blackboard, a stick figure with exaggerated features labeled Dr. Kozlov with a speech bubble saying, "I cannot speak English good." The drawing was accompanied by several printed pages that appeared to be fake translations of classic literature with broken English and ridiculous interpretations. Alina studied the materials carefully. This wasn't random teenage pranking. It was calculated psychological warfare designed to humiliate her and undermine her credibility. The level of organization suggested Tyler had help, possibly from older students or even someone outside the school. She quickly removed the materials and placed them in her desk drawer. Alina had learned long ago that reacting emotionally to provocation was exactly what bullies wanted. Instead, she would document everything and wait for the right moment to respond strategically. Students began filtering into her third period advanced literature class, and Alina could feel the anticipation in the room. Several students kept glancing between her and Tyler's empty seat, clearly expecting fireworks. Ashley Burke arrived early and took a seat directly in front of Tyler's usual spot, her phone positioned to record whatever was about to happen. Marcus Rodriguez entered next, carrying a large coffee cup that he made a show of placing on his desk. Alina noticed immediately that the cup had been modified. Small holes had been punched in the bottom and sealed with tape that could be easily removed. It was an old trick she'd seen before, designed to create an accidental spill at the most embarrassing moment possible. When Tyler finally arrived, 5 minutes after the bell, he wasn't alone. Following behind him were two students Alina didn't recognize, older teenagers, who clearly didn't belong in an advanced literature class. One was massive, at least 6.5 feet tall, with arms covered in tattoos. The other was smaller, but moved with a predatory grace that immediately put Alina on alert. "Sorry I'm late, Dr. Kozlov," Tyler announced loudly, deliberately mispronouncing her name again. "I brought some friends who wanted to hear about that European literature you're always talking about. This is Brandon and Jake. They're very interested in cultural exchange." Alina recognized the setup immediately. Tyler was bringing an intimidation muscle. Students who had no stake in her class, but could create chaos without academic consequences. It was a sophisticated escalation that suggested someone with experience in psychological manipulation was advising Tyler. "I'm sorry, but your friends need to return to their assigned classes," Alina replied calmly. "This is a closed enrollment course." Brandon, the larger student, laughed and made no move to leave. "Actually, we talked to the principal earlier. She said we could audit some classes today to see if we wanted to transfer into advanced literature next semester." Alina knew this was a lie, but calling it out directly would force a confrontation she wasn't ready for. Instead, she made a mental note to verify the claim later while proceeding with her lesson plan. "Very well," she said. "Please take seats in the back and remember that auditing students are expected to observe quietly." As the class settled in, Alina began her planned discussion of symbolism in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. She had chosen this particular work strategically. Its themes of guilt, justice, and redemption were ones she knew intimately, and the complex psychological elements would require genuine engagement from her students. Today we're examining how Dostoevsky uses the character of Raskolnikov to explore the consequences of believing you're above moral law. Alina began, writing key themes on the blackboard. Raskolnikov convinces himself that he has the right to commit murder because he believes he's superior to ordinary people. Tyler's hand shot up immediately. Kind of like how some people think they can come to America and tell us how to do things because they have fancy degrees from foreign countries. The classroom fell silent. Alina recognized the trap. Tyler was trying to make the literature discussion personal, to turn her academic expertise into a liability. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward with anticipation. "That's an interesting interpretation, Tyler," Elena replied evenly. "Can you identify specific textual evidence that supports your reading?" Tyler's smirk faltered slightly. He clearly hadn't expected her to engage academically rather than defensively. "I mean, the guy thinks he's better than everyone else, right? Kind of like people who act like their foreign education makes them smarter than Americans." Elena seized the opening. Actually, Dostoevsky was quite critical of that mindset. Raskolnikov's downfall comes precisely because he overestimates his own superiority. The novel suggests that true wisdom comes from humility and understanding your place in the broader human community. She turned to face the class directly. Who can identify a moment in the text where Raskolnikov's arrogance blinds him to important information? Several hands went up, including some students who rarely participated. Elena called on Maria Santos, a quiet girl who sat near the front. "When he doesn't notice that the old woman's sister comes back early," Maria said. "He was so focused on his plan that he didn't pay attention to the details that could have saved him." Excellent observation, Maria. And what does this suggest about the danger of assumptions? The discussion that followed was the most engaged Elena had seen her students. Even some of Tyler's usual supporters were participating thoughtfully, drawn in by the universal themes of the novel. For 20 minutes, Elena felt like she was actually teaching rather than managing classroom politics, but Tyler wasn't finished. As the class became more animated, he caught Marcus's eye and nodded toward the modified coffee cup. Marcus understood immediately and began loosening the tape on the bottom while pretending to take notes. The accident happened just as Elena was making a crucial point about the novel's climax. Marcus stood up suddenly, claiming he needed to throw away his empty cup, but as he lifted it, the bottom gave way and coffee splashed across Elena's desk, soaking her lesson plans and several student papers. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Marcus exclaimed with exaggerated concern. "I don't know what happened. The cup just fell apart." Elena stared at the mess, recognizing the deliberate sabotage but unable to prove it. Several students were already laughing, while others looked sympathetic but unwilling to speak up. Ashley had her phone out, clearly recording Elena's reaction. For a moment, Elena felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had once helped her survive life-threatening situations. Her muscles tensed, and she found herself automatically assessing the positioning of everyone in the room, identifying potential threats and escape routes. The urge to respond with overwhelming force was almost irresistible. Instead, she took a deep breath and began calmly cleaning up the spill with paper towels from her desk drawer. "Accidents happen," she said quietly. "Please be more careful in the future, Marcus." Tyler looked disappointed by her restrained response. "You know, Dr. Kozlov, where I come from, when someone disrespects you, you don't just clean it up and pretend everything's fine." Elena paused in her cleaning and looked directly at Tyler. For just a moment, she let her mask slip, and Tyler caught a glimpse of something that made him unconsciously lean back in his chair. When Elena spoke, her voice was calm but carried an undertone that made several students sit up straighter. "Where I come from, Tyler, we believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. People who constantly talk about being tough usually aren't." The room went completely quiet. Elena had just issued a challenge, and everyone knew it. Tyler's face flushed red, and Elena could see him struggling to maintain his composure in front of his audience. "Maybe you should stick to teaching books instead of trying to act tough," Tyler replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Elena finished cleaning and returned to her lesson as if nothing had happened. But the dynamic in the room had shifted. Some students were looking at her with new interest, while Tyler's supporters seemed less certain about their leader's invincibility. The rest of the class period passed without a major incident, but Elena could feel the tension building toward something bigger. Tyler had been publicly challenged, and his reputation among his peers depended on how he responded. After the students left, Elena discovered that her troubles were just beginning. Principal Williams appeared in her doorway, looking troubled and carrying a manila folder. "Dr. Kozlov, I need to speak with you about some concerns that have been brought to my attention," Principal Williams said, closing the classroom door behind her. Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of concerns?" "I've received several complaints from parents about your teaching methods. They're saying you're bringing inappropriate political content into your literature classes and showing favoritism toward certain students." Elena was stunned. "I don't understand. My curriculum follows the state standards exactly, and I treat all students equally." Principal Williams opened the folder and pulled out several printed emails. "Mrs. Morrison, Tyler's mother, says you've been singling out her son for harassment and using your position to push anti-American propaganda." Elena recognized the strategy immediately. Tyler's disruptions were being reframed as patriotic resistance to foreign influence. It was a sophisticated character assassination campaign that went far beyond typical teenage rebellion. "Principal Williams, Tyler has been disrupting my classes since his first day. I have documentation of every incident, and I've followed proper protocols for addressing behavioral issues. I understand your position, Dr. Kozlov, but perception matters in education. Several other parents have expressed concerns about whether you're the right fit for Roosevelt High School." Elena felt her new life slipping away. "Are you questioning my qualifications?" "Not your qualifications, no. But cultural fit is important too. These parents are influential in our community, and if they organize against you, it could affect school funding and support." Elena realized she was facing something more organized than random bullying. Someone was coordinating a campaign to force her out, using Tyler as the visible face while adult conspirators worked behind the scenes. "What are you asking me to do?" "I'm giving you a choice," Principal Williams said carefully. "You can submit your resignation with a positive reference, or you can stay and fight this. But I want you to understand that if you stay, you'll be under intense scrutiny. Every lesson plan, every interaction with students, every decision you make will be questioned." Elena stared at the principal, recognizing the implicit threat. This wasn't really a choice. It was a face-saving way to force her out without admitting the school couldn't protect its own teachers. "I need time to think about it," Elena said finally. "Of course, take the weekend. But I'll need your decision by Monday morning." After Principal Williams left, Elena sat alone in her empty classroom, surrounded by the evidence of the day's sabotage. Coffee stains on her desk, lesson plans ruined, and her professional reputation under attack. She had escaped international criminals only to be defeated by high school politics, but as Elena packed up her materials, she noticed something that changed everything. Hidden under one of the coffee-soaked papers was a small note, written in careful handwriting. "Dr. Kozlov, some of us see what's really happening. Tyler and his friends aren't working alone. There are adults involved, and it's bigger than just your class. If you're willing to fight back, meet me in the library after school tomorrow. Come alone." "A friend," Elena studied the note carefully. The handwriting was mature and careful, suggesting an older student or possibly a faculty member. Someone else had recognized that Tyler's campaign was too sophisticated to be entirely student-driven. For the first time since arriving in Denver, Elena felt a familiar sensation, the thrill of a puzzle that needed solving and an enemy that needed to be defeated. She had come to Roosevelt hoping to live a quiet, normal life. Instead, she had stumbled into another conspiracy that threatened innocent people. As Elena walked to her car, she made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to run again. Dr. Elena Kozlov might be a literature teacher who was expected to submit quietly to intimidation, but Elena, the woman who had taken down international criminals, was done hiding. The war Tyler Morrison thought he Winning was about to become something much more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment and opened a locked trunk she hadn't touched since arriving in Denver. Inside were items from her previous life, tactical clothing, training equipment, and most importantly, the mindset she had tried so hard to leave behind. Elena Kozlov was about to discover that some battles choose you, whether you want them or not. Her first stop was the main office, where she requested copies of Tyler Morrison's academic records under the pretense of developing individualized learning strategies. The secretary, Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, was helpful but chatty, and Elena learned more than she expected. "Oh, honey, you're dealing with Tyler?" Mrs. Hendricks shook her head sympathetically. "That boy's been a challenge since middle school. His mother calls here at least twice a week, usually to complain about something. Very involved parent, if you know what I mean." Elena filed away the information about frequent maternal involvement. What about his academic performance? "Well, that's the strange thing." Mrs. Hendricks lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Tyler's actually quite bright when he applies himself. His standardized test scores are in the 85th percentile, but his grades are barely passing. It's like he chooses to underperform." This revelation changed Elena's understanding completely. Tyler wasn't a struggling student acting out from frustration. He was an intelligent individual deliberately creating chaos. The implications were significant and troubling. Elena's investigation continued during her planning period. She accessed the school's database to research the other players in Tyler's circle. Marcus Rodriguez had a history of minor disciplinary infractions, but came from a stable family. Ashley Burke was from an affluent background, with parents who donated significantly to school programs. Both students had clean academic records until this year. When their grades had begun declining, the pattern suggested recruitment rather than natural friendship. Someone had assembled this group deliberately, choosing students who could be manipulated or incentivized to participate in the harassment campaign against Elena. During lunch, Elena positioned herself strategically in the faculty lounge where she could observe and listen to her colleagues' conversations. What she discovered was deeply concerning. "I don't know what to think about this Kozlov situation," she overheard Coach Patterson saying to the math department head. "Some of these parent complaints seem pretty serious. Have you actually observed her teaching?" asked Sarah Martinez, the English teacher who had initially been friendly to Elena. "Because I've seen her lesson plans, and they're excellent." "It's not about the lesson plans," Patterson replied. "It's about cultural fit. Some communities aren't ready for teachers who might have different values or loyalties." Elena felt a chill as she recognized the coded language of xenophobia. Someone was spreading doubt about her loyalty to America, playing on post-9/11 spheres and anti-immigrant sentiment. This wasn't random teenage bullying, it was a coordinated campaign, using sophisticated psychological warfare tactics. Lisa Thompson, the school counselor, joined the conversation. "I've been getting pressure from several board members to recommend Elena's dismissal. They're saying her foreign background might be a security risk." "Security risk?" Sarah sounded incredulous. "She teaches literature." "That's what makes it so insidious," Lisa replied quietly. "They're not making specific accusations, just raising questions about her suitability and cultural alignment. It's the kind of thing that's hard to fight because it's never stated directly." Elena had heard enough. She was facing a conspiracy that extended beyond the school into the broader community power structure. Board members were being influenced, parents were being organized, and faculty members were being divided. This level of coordination required resources, connections, and expertise that high school students simply didn't possess. The afternoon brought Elena's planned meeting with her mysterious ally. She arrived at the library 15 minutes early and positioned herself where she could observe all entrances while appearing to grade papers. The library was nearly empty during the after-school period, with only a few students studying quietly. In the far corners, at exactly 3:45 p.m., a figure approached Elena's table. To her surprise, it was David Kim, a senior she recognized from her European history class. David was an exceptional student, quiet, thoughtful, and consistently insightful in his observations about historical patterns and political movements. "Dr. Kozlov," David said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't being observed. "Thank you for coming." "You wrote the note?" David nodded and sat across from her. "I've been watching what's happening to you, and it's not random. My older brother graduated from Roosevelt 3 years ago, and he told me about similar campaigns against other teachers who didn't fit the preferred profile." Elena leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "There's a group of parents and community leaders who essentially control school policy through informal pressure. They forced out 2 other teachers in the past 5 years, a Muslim math teacher and a Hispanic social studies teacher who taught units on immigration history." David pulled out a notebook filled with careful observations. "I started documenting the pattern when I saw what was happening to you. Tyler Morrison is just the visible face of the operation. The real coordination is happening through his mother, Jennifer Morrison, who's connected to a network of influential parents." Elena studied David's notes, impressed by their thoroughness. He had identified key players, tracked communication patterns, and even documented suspicious timing of events. This 17-year-old had conducted better intelligence gathering than many professional investigators. "How do you know all this?" "My parents are Korean immigrants who own a small business downtown," David explained. "They've dealt with some of these same people in the business community. Mrs. Morrison is married to Carl Morrison, who runs Morrison Construction. They have contracts with the school district and significant political influence." The pieces were falling into place. Elena was facing an organized network with economic and political power, not just disruptive teenagers. The Morrison family had both the motivation and resources to orchestrate a sophisticated character assassination campaign. "There's more," David continued. "I think they're planning something big for Monday. Tyler and his friends have been recruiting other students, promising them something exciting. Ashley Burke posted on social media about a special presentation in your class." Elena felt her tactical instincts sharpening. "What kind of presentation?" "I don't know exactly, but they've been gathering evidence against you all week. Photos, recordings, witness statements from other students. I think they're planning to create an incident that will force your immediate dismissal." David's information confirmed Elena's worst fears. The escalation pattern suggested her enemies were moving toward a decisive confrontation designed to end her career at Roosevelt permanently. "Why are you helping me?" Elena asked. David was quiet for a moment. "Because I've seen what happens when good people get driven out by bullies with power. My family came to America believing that merit and hard work mattered more than connections and prejudice. Teachers like you prove that's still possible." Elena felt a surge of determination. David Kim represented everything she had come to America hoping to find: intelligent, principled young people who deserved protection from the kind of corruption she had fought in Europe. "David, what I'm about to tell you must remain absolutely confidential," Elena said carefully. "My background is more complicated than what's in my personnel file. I have experience dealing with organized threats, and I'm not going to let these people win." David's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded understanding. Elena spent the next hour explaining her plan. She would use the weekend to gather intelligence on the Morrison network, identifying their vulnerabilities and preparing counter-strategies. David would continue monitoring student communications and provide early warning of any planned disruptions. "I need you to be careful," Elena warned. "If they realize you're helping me, you could become a target too." "I understand the risks," David replied, "but someone has to stand up to them." That evening, Elena returned to her apartment and activated skills she had hoped never to use again. She opened her laptop and began researching the Morrison family's business dealings, political connections, and financial interests. What she discovered was a web of relationships that extended throughout Denver's power structure. Carl Morrison's construction company had received millions in school district contracts over the past decade. Jennifer Morrison served on the boards of 3 different community organizations and had close ties to 2 school board members. The family had donated substantial amounts to local political campaigns and maintained relationships with law enforcement officials. Elena also discovered something troubling about the previous teachers who had been forced out. Both had been highly qualified educators with excellent student evaluations. Their dismissals had followed similar patterns: escalating student disruptions, coordinated parent complaints, and questions about their cultural fit for the community. The pattern suggested this wasn't personal animosity toward Elena specifically, but rather a systematic campaign to maintain cultural homogeneity in the school system. Elena represented a threat to their vision of American education: intelligent, accomplished, and foreign-born. She challenged their narrative about American superiority. As Elena researched deeper into public records, she found connections that made her blood run cold. Carl Morrison's construction company had been awarded a contract to renovate Roosevelt High School's security systems, including the installation of new surveillance cameras and access controls. The family literally had inside knowledge of the school's vulnerabilities. More disturbing was Jennifer Morrison's involvement with a group called Parents for Academic Excellence, which claimed to advocate for traditional educational values, but appeared to be a front for excluding diversity from the school system. The group's website contained coded language about preserving American educational traditions and ensuring appropriate cultural values. Elena printed out organizational charts, financial records, and communication patterns. By midnight, she had assembled a comprehensive intelligence briefing that would have impressed her former colleagues at the International Security Institute. But knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. Elena needed evidence of specific wrongdoing and a strategy for exposing the conspiracy without endangering David or other innocent students. She also needed to prepare for Monday's anticipated confrontation while maintaining her cover as a mild-mannered literature teacher. Elena spent Sunday morning visiting the school campus under the pretense of preparing for the week ahead. What she really wanted was to test the security system Carl Morrison's company had installed and identify any surveillance blind spots that might be useful. The school's layout was more complex than she had initially realized. Multiple entrances, interconnected hallways, and numerous classrooms created both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Elena memorized exit routes, emergency procedures, and the locations of administrative offices. Most importantly, she identified the main security office where all surveillance feeds were monitored. If she needed to control information flow during a crisis, that room would be crucial. Sunday afternoon brought an unexpected development. Elena received a phone call from an unlisted number. Dr. Kozlov? The voice was female, middle-aged, and nervous. Yes? My name is Rebecca Chun. I'm Robert Chun's wife. We need to talk, but not over the phone. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour? Elena's tactical instincts screamed caution, but something in the woman's voice suggested genuine fear rather than deception. Why should I trust you? Because my husband is about to become the next target, and you're the only person who might be able to help him. An hour later, Elena sat on a park bench overlooking the South Platte River, watching Rebecca Chen approach. The woman was clearly terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder and clutching her purse with white knuckles. Thank you for coming, Rebecca said as she sat down. I didn't know who else to turn to. What's happening to your husband? Rebecca took a shaky breath. Robert has been asking questions about the pattern of teacher dismissals at Roosevelt. He's been documenting incidents and trying to build a case for administrative review. Yesterday, he received a phone call warning him to stop his investigation or face consequences. Elena felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. What kind of consequences? They know about our mortgage, Rebecca whispered. Robert's student loans, our credit card debt, everything. The caller said it would be unfortunate if Robert's employment at Roosevelt ended just when we're struggling financially. Elena recognized the sophisticated intimidation tactics immediately. The Morrison network had access to personal financial information and wasn't hesitant to use economic threats to silence opposition. Rebecca, has your husband shared his findings with anyone else? He was planning to present them to the school board at Monday's meeting. But after the phone call, he's having second thoughts. Elena realized that Robert Chun's investigation could provide the evidence she needed to expose the conspiracy. But if he was intimidated into silence, a crucial opportunity would be lost. I need to see your husband's documentation, Elena said carefully, and I need to know exactly what he's discovered. Rebecca looked around nervously before pulling a flash drive from her purse. He doesn't know I took this. He's too scared to act, but I can't just watch them destroy good teachers because of prejudice and power games. Elena pocketed the flash drive. Rebecca, your husband is in danger whether he speaks up or not. These people eliminate threats, and his investigation has already made him a liability. What are you saying? Elena met Rebecca's eyes directly. I'm saying that sometimes the only way to protect yourself from bullies is to fight back harder than they expect. Your husband's evidence might be the key to ending this permanently. As Rebecca Chun walked away, Elena felt the familiar pre-mission adrenaline beginning to build. Monday would bring Tyler Morrison's planned confrontation, but Elena would be ready with evidence, allies, and skills her enemies had never imagined. The literature teacher who had been quietly accepting harassment was about to reveal that Dr. Elena Kozlov was much more dangerous than anyone at Roosevelt High School could possibly comprehend. The real war was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with an electric tension that seemed to permeate every corner of Roosevelt High School. Elena entered the building knowing this would be the day everything changed, one way or another. She had spent Sunday night analyzing Robert Chun's evidence and preparing for multiple scenarios, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Tyler and his backers had prepared something beyond her expectations. The flash drive Rebecca had given her contained explosive information. Robert had documented a systematic pattern of harassment targeting teachers who didn't fit the Morrison network's preferred demographic profile. Financial records showed suspicious patterns of contract awards to Morrison Construction coinciding with teacher dismissals. Most damning were email communications between Jennifer Morrison and school board members discussing the need to maintain community standards. In hiring practices, Elena arrived early and made copies of the most crucial evidence, hiding them in multiple locations throughout the school. If something happened to her, David Kim would know where to find the documentation needed to expose the conspiracy. The first sign of trouble came during the second period. Elena noticed unusual activity in the hallways. Students who weren't normally at Roosevelt wandering the corridors. Several adults she didn't recognize observing classes through doorway windows. And maintenance workers installing additional security cameras in strategic locations. When Elena's third period advanced literature class began, the atmosphere was unlike anything she had experienced. Tyler arrived with his usual crew, but they were accompanied by nearly a dozen other students she had never seen before. The classroom was packed beyond capacity, with students sitting on windowsills and standing against the walls. Ashley Burke had positioned herself prominently in the front row with multiple recording devices visible on her desk. Marcus Rodriguez sat ready with what appeared to be props hidden in a large backpack. But most concerning was Tyler himself. He exuded a confidence that suggested he knew something Elena didn't. "Good morning, class," Elena began, maintaining her composure despite the obvious setup. I see we have many visitors today. Tyler stood up immediately, abandoning any pretense of normal classroom behavior. Actually, Dr. Kozlov, we have some questions for you before we start today's lesson. Elena recognized the moment of truth. This is a literature class, Tyler. If you have questions about the curriculum, please see me after class. Oh, but these questions are about literature, Tyler replied with a grin that made Elena's skin crawl. Specifically, about whether you're qualified to teach American students about American values. The room erupted in murmurs and nervous laughter. Elena could see several of her regular students looking uncomfortable, including David Kim, who appeared tense and alert in his usual back corner seat. My qualifications are a matter of public record, Elena replied calmly. Now please take your seat so we can begin today's discussion of. Actually, we did some research on your qualifications, Ashley interrupted, pulling out a manila folder. And we found some very interesting things about your background. Elena's blood ran cold. If they had somehow uncovered her true identity and connections to international law enforcement, everything she had built in Denver would collapse instantly. Tyler walked to the front of the classroom as if he owned it. Class, did you know that our teacher Dr. Kozlov has connections to foreign intelligence services? That she was involved in international incidents before coming to America? The accusation was both terrifying and revealing. Someone with serious investigative capabilities had been digging into Elena's background, but they had only uncovered fragments of the truth. More importantly, they were willing to make these accusations publicly, which meant they felt protected from retaliation. Tyler, you're making serious allegations without evidence, Elena replied, but she could see the damage was already being done. Students were whispering and staring at her with suspicion and fear. Oh, we have evidence, Ashley chimed in, pulling out printed documents. Immigration records, employment histories, connections to criminal investigations in Europe. The question is, what are you really doing at our school? Elena realized they were trying to flip the narrative, painting her as a potential threat rather than a victim of harassment. It was a sophisticated strategy that would make any response sound offensive and suspicious, but Elena had faced worse odds before. You're absolutely right, she said calmly, walking to the center of the classroom. I do have connections to international law enforcement. I have been involved in criminal investigations, and those experiences have taught me how to recognize organized conspiracies when I see them. The classroom fell silent. Elena's calm admission had disrupted their planned script. Tyler, would you like to explain to the class how a high school student gained access to restricted immigration records? Or how you obtained confidential employment information that requires federal clearance to access? Tyler's confident expression wavered slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Elena pulled out her own folder, the evidence she had compiled over the weekend. Then perhaps you can explain why your mother's organization, Parents for Academic Excellence, has systematically targeted teachers from minority backgrounds? Or why did your father's construction company receive lucrative school contracts immediately after the dismissal of teachers who asked inconvenient questions? The room exploded in shocked whispers. Elena was no longer playing defense, she was on the attack. Class, would you like to know what real corruption looks like? Elena continued, projecting her voice with the authority she had once used to. Brief international security teams. It looks like a network of parents and business leaders who use intimidation, economic pressure, and illegal surveillance to control educational content and exclude qualified teachers based on their ethnicity and country of origin. Tyler was visibly rattled now. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. Elena opened her folder and began reading. Email from Jennifer Morrison to school board member Patricia Walsh, dated last month. We need to be more selective about foreign-born teachers who might not share our community values. Financial records showing Morrison Construction received a $2 million security upgrade contract 3 days after the dismissal of Maria Hernandez in 2022. Several students gasped. Elena could see that some of Tyler's recruited audience were beginning to understand they had been manipulated into participating in something much darker than teenage rebellion. But Tyler wasn't finished. Elena saw him signal to Marcus, who immediately reached into his backpack and pulled out what appeared to be a weapon. The classroom erupted in screams as Marcus stood up, pointing what looked like a gun directly at Elena. In the chaos, several students ran toward the door while others dove under their desks. Elena's training took over instantly. Her mind processed the situation in milliseconds. Weapon type, likely fake based on Marcus's nervous grip. Exit routes, door blocked by panicking students. Cover options, teacher's desk. Potential allies, David Kim moving toward the emergency button. But instead of diving for cover, Elena did something that shocked everyone in the room. She laughed. "Marcus, that's an excellent prop," she said calmly, not moving from her position in the center of the classroom. "Very realistic." "Where did you get it?" "The same place Tyler got those fake federal documents." Marcus's hand began shaking. "It's not fake." "Yes, it is," Elena replied with complete confidence. "Because if it were real, you would have already used it instead of waving it around for dramatic effect. Also, the safety mechanism is visible from here, and you're holding it like someone who's never handled an actual firearm." Elena began walking slowly toward Marcus, her movements calm and controlled. "You see, class, this is what real intimidation looks like. Tyler and his backers know they can't win with facts or evidence, so they resort to threats and fear tactics. Stay back!" Marcus shouted, but his voice cracked with panic. Elena continued approaching, her voice remaining perfectly steady. "Marcus, you're not a criminal. You're a 17-year-old boy who got manipulated into participating in an adult conspiracy. Put down the fake gun, and I'll make sure you're treated as a victim rather than a perpetrator." When Elena was within arm's reach, Marcus made a crucial mistake. He turned the weapon slightly to check if the safety was engaged, confirming Elena's assessment that it was indeed a realistic prop. In one fluid motion, Elena stepped forward, grabbed Marcus's wrist with her left hand, and twisted sharply while striking his forearm with her right palm. The weapon flew across the room as Marcus cried out in surprise and pain. Before anyone could react, Elena had spun Marcus around and controlled him with a restraint hold that left him immobilized but unharmed. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The classroom was dead silent, except for Marcus's heavy breathing. Elena held him securely while speaking in the same calm tone she had used throughout the confrontation. "This is called Krav Maga, class. It's a defensive martial art developed for real-world situations. I learned it because I faced actual threats from actual criminals who wanted to silence me for exposing their activities." She looked directly at Tyler, who was staring at her in shock and growing fear. "Tyler, your performance is over. Call your mother and tell her that Dr. Elena Kozlov is not as easy to intimidate as the other teachers they've driven away." Elena released Marcus, who immediately ran toward the door. Several other students followed, including most of Tyler's recruited audience. Within moments, only Elena's regular students remained, along with Tyler and Ashley. "You just assaulted a student," Ashley shouted, her phone still recording. "We have everything on video." "Excellent," Elena replied. "Make sure you include the part where Marcus threatened me with a weapon and I used minimal force to disarm him. Also include Tyler's admission that he has illegal access to federal records." Principal Williams burst through the door at that moment, flanked by security guards and followed closely by 2 people Elena recognized from her research, Carl and Jennifer Morrison. "Dr. Kozlov, step away from the students immediately." "Principal." Williams ordered. Elena complied, moving to her desk while maintaining visual contact with all the adults in the room. Principal Williams, I believe we need to discuss the coordinated campaign of harassment that's been conducted against me. The only thing we need to discuss is your immediate termination, Jennifer Morrison interjected. You just physically attacked a student in front of witnesses. Alina smiled calmly and pulled out her phone. Actually, Mrs. Morrison, what we need to discuss is this recorded conversation between you and school board member Patricia Walsh, where you explicitly discuss using fabricated evidence to force my dismissal. She pressed play, and Jennifer Morrison's voice filled the room. We can't have these foreign teachers undermining American values. Find something we can use against her, or create something if necessary. The color drained from Jennifer Morrison's face. Principal Williams looked confused and alarmed, while Carl Morrison stepped forward menacingly. Where did you get that recording? He demanded. From the same federal investigation that's been monitoring your organization's activities. Alina replied, which was technically true even though the investigation was her own work. Did you really think you could conduct an organized campaign of discrimination, intimidation without attracting law enforcement attention? Alina pulled out additional documents. Federal investigators are very interested in how Morrison Construction has received millions in school contracts immediately following the dismissal of teachers who questioned district policies. They're also interested in your organization's systematic targeting of educators based on national origin and ethnicity. Carl Morrison's face was turning red with anger. You have no authority to investigate anything. You're absolutely right. Alina agreed. But I do have the right to document harassment and threats against me. And when that documentation reveals federal civil rights violations, I have the obligation to report them to appropriate authorities. Principal Williams finally found her voice. Dr. Kozlov, even if what you're saying is true, you can't take the law into your own hands. I haven't taken the law into my own hands, Alina replied. I've simply defended myself against a weapon, threat, and documented evidence of systematic discrimination. The law enforcement response will come from actual federal agents. As if on cue, David Kim appeared in the doorway with two adults Alina didn't recognize. Dr. Kozlov, David said formally. These are Agents Sarah Chun and Michael Rodriguez from the FBI's Civil Rights Division. They'd like to speak with everyone who's been involved in this situation. Alina had to admire David's timing and resourcefulness. While she hadn't actually contacted federal agents herself, David had apparently done so based on the evidence she had shared with him. Agent Chun stepped forward, displaying her credentials. We're investigating allegations of civil rights violations and conspiracy to interfere with federal employment discrimination protections. We'd like to speak with all parties involved. The next hour was a blur of interviews, evidence collection, and formal statements. Alina provided her documentation of the harassment campaign, while the Morrison family found themselves answering uncomfortable questions about their organization's activities and Carl's access to confidential information. Tyler, faced with the reality of the federal investigation, finally broke down and admitted that he had been promised money and guaranteed college admission in exchange for disrupting Alina's classes. Marcus and Ashley corroborated his statement, revealing they had been told Alina was a foreign agent who posed a threat to American students. By the end of the day, Carl Morrison was in federal custody for unauthorized access to government databases. Jennifer Morrison was facing charges related to conspiracy and civil rights violations, and Tyler was enrolled in counseling rather than criminal proceedings, having been determined to be a manipulated minor rather than a willing conspirator. Principal Williams, faced with evidence of her own negligence in allowing the harassment to continue, submitted her resignation effective immediately, 3 weeks later. Alina stood in front of her advanced literature class, now restored to its normal size and composition, leading a discussion about the themes of justice and redemption in To Kill a Mockingbird. The irony of teaching Harper Lee's masterpiece about prejudice and moral courage wasn't lost on her. Who can identify the moment when Scout Finch finally understands what her father meant about real courage? Elena asked. David Kim raised his hand. When she realizes that real courage isn't about proving you're tough, but about doing what's right even when it's dangerous, Elena smiled. Excellent observation, David. And what does the novel suggest about the relationship between individual actions and systemic change? The discussion that followed was everything Elena had hoped for when she first decided to become a teacher. Students engaged thoughtfully with complex moral questions, connected literature to their own experiences, and demonstrated the kind of critical thinking that would serve them well in college and beyond. After class, Elena found a note on her desk from Maria Santos, the quiet student who had been one of the first to participate in meaningful discussion. Dr. Kozlov, thank you for showing us that standing up to bullies isn't about being the strongest person in the room. It's about being the person who refuses to let fear win. You didn't just teach us literature, you taught us how to be brave. That afternoon, Elena received a phone call from Dr. Rebecca Morrison, no relation to the family that had caused so much trouble. Dr. Morrison was the Dean of Education at the University of Colorado, and she had a proposition. Dr. Kozlov, your experience at Roosevelt has attracted national attention in education circles. We'd like to offer you a position developing curriculum and training programs for teachers, dealing with harassment and discrimination. Your unique background in both international security and education makes you ideal for this work. Elena considered the offer carefully. Part of her was tempted by the opportunity to work at the university level, where she could influence education, policy, and teacher training on a broader scale. But as she looked around her classroom, at the student artwork on the walls, the carefully organized bookshelves, and the desk where she had finally found the courage to stop running from her past, Elena knew her answer. Thank you for the offer, Dr. Morrison, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. That evening, Elena walked through the quiet hallways of Roosevelt High School, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Denver hoping to escape conflict and live a peaceful life as a literature teacher. Instead, she had discovered that some battles choose you whether you want them or not, but she had also learned something important about herself. Dr. Elena Kozlov wasn't two separate people, the international security expert and the high school teacher. She was one person who had found a way to use all of her skills and experiences to protect students and fight for justice in whatever form it took. As Elena locked her classroom door and headed home, she reflected on a quote from one of her favorite authors, Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Elena's story had been told, her voice had been heard, and her true strength had been revealed. The girl from Bratislava who had learned to fight in order to survive had become the woman who knew when to fight and when to teach, when to reveal her power and when to show her compassion. Most importantly, she had learned that real courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about acting with integrity, despite your fears. And in a classroom full of young people trying to figure out who they wanted to become, that was the most valuable lesson she could possibly teach. The bullies who had laughed at her accent had learned that Dr. Elena Kozlov's true strength had never been hidden by her voice or disguised by her gentleness. It had been there all along, waiting for the moment when it was needed most. And when that moment came, she was ready. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.